Hello and welcome to our new podcast, Asking for a Friend. My name's Louise and this is my co-host Adam. Hi Adam.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I am very good. Yeah, I've actually just got back off holiday, so nice and relaxed and chilled and slightly suntanned.
And more to the point, who are you?
So, well, do you want the full story? We can start right at the beginning.
Yes, let's start right at the beginning. I'm only saying who are you because I think possibly people might remember me from previous podcasts that I've done. But you are new to our podcast scene. So yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself, Adam, and maybe talk about how we met.
Yeah, so I'm new to podcasting. I've never done anything on a podcast before. We actually met at a protest. It was in 2018, am I right?
18. Yes, it was.
2018. So it was a very peaceful protest that was organised by your good self, and we went to the London Excel Arena, I think it was, wasn't it?
Can I just issue a warning here? The last person that I met at that protest, I did marry.
Comes with a little disclaimer there, yeah. So yeah, it was the first time that I had been to anything like that, because I had learnt a number of things about the organisation in the preceding 10 years, which had kind of led me to that point. And the protest was a real eye-opener because I'm sure listeners will sort of associate with this, but when you are a Jehovah's Witness, you're taught to view people on the outside or ex-members or people that stand outside conventions with signs as evil and degenerates and nasty people that you never want to speak to. Nothing could have been further from the truth. It was genuine people that were there that used to be in the organisation that had been treated badly and that had discovered some things about the organisation which made them no longer be able to be part of the organisation because their conscience wouldn't let them because of what they'd learnt. So he was pretty much...
in my situation, not treated badly, really, just a long, slow fade out accidentally, and then woke up later and found out things, as you say, that I couldn't stand by any longer.
Yeah. And I think at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the largest. It was kind of the largest protest at a Jehovah's Witness convention.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there were well over 100 people over the 2 days or the 2 weekends.
There were people from, I think, between 10 and 15 different countries. So it was quite not an interesting, exciting, unique situation.
Yeah, but it was such an experience. I will never forget that. So that answers the question of where we met. We met a little bit more recently at my dad's funeral, was 2 months ago. My dad died a witness, and a number of my family are still witnesses. But I went along to the funeral. I asked Steph, who's a mutual friend of ours, obviously, to come along with me, and I think Steph asked you to come along.
She did, yeah. Steph invited me to your dad's funeral.
Which was I was overwhelmed by that, actually, because obviously you didn't know him, and it was just nice to have some support there. It was really, really appreciated that. Perhaps we should do another podcast in the future all about JW funerals, because that was some experience for me.
I think we should. I think that's a story for another day. But that's kind of from there was where this Asking for a Friend was born, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because obviously you'd done podcasts before, and I keep quite up to date with what's going on in the world of Jehovah's Witnesses. I read a lot of the literature. I get the elders' letters sent to me, etc., etc. So I keep up to date. Yeah.
You didn't used to be an elder, did you?
No.
Okay.
So I was a ministerial servant for quite a long time, but it's a chap who is a witness, but he is mentally out, if you like,
Right.
but he's physically
Yeah.
in the organisation, and he currently works in one of the Bethels, and he sends
Oh my God. And he sends you the letters.
yeah, well, he has it's not just me. He has quite a large distribution list of email
Okay.
addresses, and obviously he has a pseudonym, so we don't know who he is.
No.
And he sends all the elders' letters to us probably before the elders get them. So we get
Wow.
to see what the changes are, and some of the things that are not read out to the congregation, which are only privy to the
Yes.
elders. So it's quite interesting to see that side of it.
Mm. Yeah.
Probably enough material for another podcast as well.
Yeah, definitely. So before we go any further and delve into your story, tell me what the general what we're looking for with our podcast. What are we trying to do?
So I was thinking, I've thought about this a lot over the weeks since we've discussed this, and in my mind, we don't want to make a podcast where we're attacking the faith that people have. So
Yeah.
if someone has a genuine faith in a religion, that's fine. It might be the
Yeah.
best thing for them. I think from my perspective, all I want to do is say, look, these are the facts that I've discovered, and they're actually being hidden from most witnesses that are currently in congregations. So here are the facts. You make up your mind. You do whatever you want with those facts, but don't be in the dark.
Yeah.
You know,
Make an informed choice.
make an informed choice. Don't just do what you're told, and don't just accept the reason that you're given for a particular change, for instance, that happens in the organisation.
And the fact that witnesses are not allowed to ask questions, especially if you're baptized, it's seen as almost apostasy asking questions, which is why you can come here and ask for a friend, because people do have genuine questions that are still in. They're not wanting to be subversive or undermine the faith, but there are genuine questions that need answering. And just like with a child, you wouldn't just fob them off and say, "Oh well, I'm not telling you." You know, people are entitled to answers, and I think that's what we're trying to get to the heart of. That if there are genuine questions out there that people are thinking about, but are not allowed to ask, I'd like this to be a forum where people could maybe find out some, as you say, some information, some facts. We don't want it to just be a very biased, ain't it awful, everything's terrible about this particular group. We just want to look at some facts, and then people can do what they want with it. So what was the thing in your life that took you from the inside to someone who started thinking?
So there's quite a long answer to that. I wrote quite a lot of notes on this, because sometimes you don't even realize yourself until you write it down, do you?
No.
There were a number of things. It's probably best if I just give a brief history of me,
Please do.
And maybe listeners might be able to associate with it a little bit. So my parents became witnesses in the early 80s. It was when there was like a big boom starting in the UK, lots of people coming into the congregations. So I was brought up as a witness from being born. Mm-hmm. As a child, I didn't really pay attention at the meetings. I fell asleep as soon as I got there.
I'd be smacking your legs for that. I'm sorry, that's terrible.
Do you know what? I got away with it. I think because it meant that my mum didn't have to, keep me busy, keep me entertained. So I used to fall asleep, and then the final song at 9:30 on a Thursday night, I'd wake up, and that'd be it. So I was pretty much like that till I was about 10 years old.
So you were
Um,
slightly less indoctrinated than the rest of us then, right?
I think it still went in. I think it went in
Yeah.
subconsciously
Yeah.
because I ended up getting baptized at 12.
What?
So yeah, I suddenly woke up. I stopped sleeping at the meetings when I was about 10, and then within 2 years, I'd been baptized.
Blimey
Um,
heck.
yeah,
12.
so
Oh,
it was. I wouldn't say I felt it as a pressure, but it was an
yeah.
expectation. I think it's an expectation to get baptized young. Um, and yeah, I must have answered all the questions correctly because 12, I was
Yeah.
baptized.
Did your siblings get baptized as young?
So my older sister never got baptized. Do you know what, my older brother? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he ever got baptized. I really don't know because he's quite a bit older than me.
Right.
So
Yeah.
when I was a child, he was kind of late teens, getting ready to leave
Right.
home. So I really don't know if he was. I've got a feeling that I was the first one of the children to be baptized in my
So
family.
you won.
I won. Yep, yep.
Well done. Were you the favourite child because of that?
I was the middle of five, so the way I've always viewed it is that I was the forgotten middle child syndrome. You know,
Yeah.
the one that's
Yeah.
forgotten about.
Yeah.
And I think I was quite happy with that. I kind of kept a low profile and
Yeah.
laid low, and my older brother and sister and younger brother and sister were the ones that got in trouble, and I just kind of, went under the radar a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was baptized at 12, and then almost immediately I was quite heavily used on the congregation meetings. So
Yeah.
I'd be used, for
Mhm.
demonstrations or giving talks.
Yeah.
And I used to. This might resonate with a few listeners. In my school holidays in August, I
Yeah.
would I would put auxiliary. I would auxiliary pioneer. So I would use my whole 6 weeks holiday to get I think it was 60 hours back then.
Yeah, it
Um,
was. Yeah.
yeah, so I'd use my summer holidays to get my 60 hours in. And
Yeah.
it just led on from there, really. I was used for assembly programs at quite a young age. And it kind of got a bit ridiculous in that almost every assembly from when I was the age of 12 until I was about 17, I was on the assembly program, interviews and being asked about experiences at school. And this is sort of leading to one of the little questions that lodged in my mind. I'd been asked by the circuit overseer to be interviewed by him on one of his talks at the assembly. So obviously, I said, yes, that'd be great. I used to enjoy doing it. So I went to the rehearsal, and all the brothers and sisters that had assembly parts, they were getting ready to give their bit before the circuit overseer, so he could approve of what they were saying before they did it for real at the assembly in a few weeks'
Yeah.
time. And the circuit overseer took me to one side, and he says, right, we've got about 10 minutes to discuss our part. He says, so I'm going to give a talk about this. He says, and I know you've got an experience of witnessing to a classmate at school. I said, yeah. So he said, tell me a bit about it. So I told him the full story. I'd witnessed to this classmate, and I told him about, I think it was the memorial, or he could come along, bring his parents, etc. And the circuit overseer said, "Oh, that's really nice. That's going to encourage the brothers and sisters.
Mm.
But don't you think it would encourage the brothers and sisters more if you said that this happened?" I stopped for a minute and I thought, well, hang on a minute. He's asking me to basically lie.
Yeah.
And then because I was 13 years old and he was the circuit overseer, I said, yeah, it would sound better. It would encourage the brothers more. So I embellished the experience and added a complete lie to it that he'd endorsed.
Yeah.
that's what I repeated on the assembly program on the day. And at the time, because I was only young, it didn't strike me how bad it was to lie like that.
No, of course, because I mean, children embellish anyway. Well, adults embellish anyway, don't they? It's kind of a natural part of human life, but it carries a lot more weight at an assembly program.
Absolutely, because you're taught to believe everything that's said from the platform.
Yes.
And because he was the circuit overseer, everyone looks up to the circuit overseer.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, if he's said it's okay, it must be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I never really thought about that again for a number of years. It kind of just lodged in the back of my mind that had happened. And it came back to me when I was about maybe 21. And I was at an assembly and I was listening to an experience on the assembly. And I was sat in the audience and it just crossed my mind that I thought, it sounds a bit implausible what that brother's saying. And then it came back to mind what I'd done as a 13-year-old. And I thought, you know what? I don't know if I can trust everything that's said from that platform.
That's quite interesting because I did believe everything in the watchtowers. Like the Africans that would walk 12 miles to the convention through crocodile infested. I genuinely thought that was happening. It's only a long time after that I thought maybe those were embellished stories to encourage people to put a lot of effort in. But you obviously knew that more intimately.
Yeah, and it kind of, that experience with the circuit overseer, it kind of hit home to me that, it's not about, relating your experience as much. It's about encouraging the brothers and sisters and making them good about going on the ministry or being at the meetings. It doesn't have to be strictly true. It's just about the end result. And that's what
the end justifies the means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had another experience later on in life that kind of, it was along the same lines. So I was asked to start giving public talks quite young. I think I was 18 when I did my first public talk.
Grief.
And then
that's a bit precocious.
Well, it was ridiculously young when you think about it, because what life experience have you had at 18?
No, 18.
A few years later, I was allowed to go out and visit other congregations and give public talks, and so it all happened very young. But in my kind of early to mid 20s, I listened very carefully to some of the things that brothers said in their public talks, because I always wanted to verify quotes that they'd made.
Yeah.
So obviously this was before I had the internet. It was before most people had the internet and could check, multiple sources. So I remember distinctly, I was listening to a public talk at my home congregation by this visiting speaker, and he made a comment. He said a quote, and he was using the quote to prove a Bible point. And I went up to him after the meeting, and I said, I really enjoyed your talk. By the way, where did you get that quote from? Because I'd like to use it in a talk. And he said, I think I've got it in my other notes in my bag, so I'll go over and check, and I'll let you know. I thought, that's great. So I went off and spoke to somebody else, and 10, 15 minutes had gone, and he'd been speaking to a few people at the front, and I went back over to him. I said, did you manage to find that quote?
Yeah.
And he said, no. I tell you what, I'll find it when I get home, and I'll get in touch with you and give you the quote. So I said, right, well, here's my number. And at this point, I was just starting to suspect, hang on a minute.
There was no quote.
Yeah, as he made that up. So I gave him my number, and I said, I would really be interested in you giving that to me. And of course, I never heard from him again. And I wonder whether he had either embellished it or made it up, because I never found the quote anywhere. It wasn't in Watchtower publications. He didn't give the reference during the talk of where it was from. And I just suspect that actually that's quite a common practice to do a bit of embellishment and put the odd lie in.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, I would say I never knew at the time, but looking back, some of the encouraging stories were much more improbable when I think about them now than they seemed at the time. When I was at university, I wrote my dissertation. I was still a witness, long story. And I wrote my dissertation about Jehovah's Witnesses, and I wrote it in the style of the Watchtower. You know, a wise man once said, and a person said, and a philosopher mentioned. And my supervisor went through it with a red pen on almost every sentence and said, who said this? You know, book, page, reference, volume, name. And I was like stunned. It really stunned me that I'd written it in what I thought was this lovely, fluent Watchtower style conversation, and it was quite inaccurate at every level because there were no references.
It's interesting you say that, because what year did you leave?
I think around 2000, so a long time ago.
So I think it was after that. I think it was around about 2011, maybe. There was a letter to all bodies of elders asking them to get rid of publications that were older than a certain date.
Right.
And if you go onto the jw.org website now, you only find a certain number of publications. So you don't find things like the Old Creation book, anything from the 80s or before, really, apart from some Watchtower and Awake bound volumes. And it was the Creation book. I think it was printed in 1983 or 82.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to see how much the organisation played about with the truth, get a copy of that book online, PDF. It's there online on other websites, and check the quotes in that book from secular sources, and then look up the original quotes, and you'll be quite shocked at how some of them are twisted.
So there's arguments for and against. Let's take both sides of that. What would be a genuine reason for getting rid of all literature from prior to a certain date, do you think, that you could stand by and say, no, that makes sense?
It's old light.
Oh, yeah, it's old light. Yes. It's old light. We don't want to confuse people. The light gets brighter. That hangs together from a witness point of view. And what would be the question around it? The
whole sort of environment that witnesses live in now doesn't seem to have the kind of deep study about deep prophecies, and what certain things in the Bible mean, like the prophecy of Daniel and Isaiah and Jeremiah. It seems to have gone very light.
Yeah.
Almost like it's probably not the right expression to use, but it feels like it's dumbed down a lot.
Yeah. And also it's very curated, isn't it? What the current light that people are allowed to read and interrogate is very curated. If the light has got brighter, if that's a genuine argument, and let's say, for instance, it is a genuine argument, even if things have changed and the light has got brighter, a devoted person would be able to read the old light and the new light and it not erode their faith, surely. It's not like apostate material, is it? It's not material from outside the organisation being critical. It is still material from the organisation. So in the interest of historical knowledge and seeing how things have developed, it wouldn't, in my opinion, be bad for a witness to read old light and know it, and have that argument around it. So I feel there's some questions around why they might do that. That's a little aside. So yeah,
and it might be an interesting one to discuss on another podcast, that because the organisation used to be very much about the doctrine. What does Revelation mean? What does the four horsemen of the apocalypse mean?
Yeah.
And today it just seems to be very much, direct people to the website and invite them.
Yeah, don't discuss anything.
Don't get into anything deep with anyone.
They're not bothered about who the king of the north and the king of the south are anymore, I don't think, are they? I mean, we used to spend blooming hours and hours chewing that one over, and then sometimes it'd change, the identity would change, and we'd adopt a new understanding of which king was which. And I think it's...
Yeah, I think we studied the Revelation book 4 times at the book studies. That was some. I mean, that was some book. Some crazy stuff in that.
We've got about 5 different topics to discuss now, haven't we, in subsequent podcasts? This is just a big long trailer for what's to come, isn't it?
There's more to come, folks. There's more to come.
More to come.
Anyway, I'll get back on track. What was I talking about?
You were talking about how you've been asked to embellish.
Little doubts in my mind as to, am I hearing the truth from the platform? I know some things are the truth because I can verify it, but I've had experience of brothers giving lies from the platform. I've been asked to lie from the platform, so how many other people have as well. So that kind of sat in the back of my head. I was still an active witness. I was pioneering. I was a ministerial servant. In my late teens, early 20s, I discovered women. So that kind of sidetracked me a little bit.
I was just about to say, you were a very attractive marriage proposition, weren't you? Pioneering and a ministerial servant. You were...
Subject of another podcast is...
another trailer.
Conventions and assemblies were like, it wasn't like Tinder before Tinder, but it was...
It was pretty close, wasn't it? It was the realm of people that you were of suitable people to date.
Absolutely, yeah. A bit like a marriage fair kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'd begun to get to know someone. I ended up getting married young, as a lot of witnesses do. Got married at 21, and then pretty much settled into married life, pioneering. We were both pioneering to begin with, and I was just busy in the congregation, and kind of going along quite busy, quite happy with what I was doing. There was a few little niggles along the way. There'd be things that would come up, and I'd ask a question, or why are the elders doing that when they've not been given direction to do that? And I'd just file them in the back of my mind, but then I would end up with 100 things filed in the back of my mind, and I think, well, if I don't start answering some of these questions, I'm going to have 1,000 things filed up there. It's going to get sort of unbearable. The next big thing that happened, and this is a bit of an odd one, because there's no one I've spoken to that's an ex-JW that had the similar experience. But the next big bump in the road for me was in about 2009. The music started to change from having. Do you remember the very simple piano melodies that we had at the meetings?
I remember the Pink songbook, that singing and accompanying yourself with music in your hearts, and it was massively amazing to change to the brown one with all the Israelites holding the songbooks up on the fly cover. The brown one was the one most of my all of my youth. The brown one was the one, and it was very simple piano music, quite nice melodies of the songs. And then in about 2009, the governing body said, we're making the music better, and they got orchestras, and they started changing the music. So they got rid of the piano, simple piano melodies, and they replaced it with a full orchestra. And then in time, they they added, electric guitars and drums. And I thought, so old, I didn't know any of that.
This would have been about 9 years after you left. And I remember at the time, there was a little bit, like some people were saying, oh yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it great? And some other people were saying, we've changed, because nobody likes change sometimes, do they?
No.
And I, just by coincidence, I had a book out from the library, and it was about how governments and businesses, how they try and influence their subjects or their workers, their employees. And there was a chapter on music. Music can be used to either prompt certain emotions in a person or to influence them in a certain way. So, for instance, there'll be a military band that might play when an army is about to go into war, and they'll play a particular type of music to motivate people to go into battle. And that corresponded with what I was experiencing with this change of music. And I thought, oh, they're changing it for a reason, because they're spending money on the change. They're changing it to provoke more of an emotional response in us, or to change the response that they're trying to provoke. So I thought, yeah, we're being manipulated by the music in some way. And I thought, well, what are the reasons for the other changes? So I kept a very close eye on changes from that point in. And obviously there were a lot of changes coming at that point. There were changes in how congregations were formed, how the money flowed through the system. I think it was 2012 or around about then when basically the headquarters took all the money. Left each congregation.
When did the Tuesday book group stop? Was that around then?
I think it was around about 2009, 2010.
Right, yeah. There was a change in the way they said elders were appointed, because it used to be... Yeah, it used to be through circuit overseers, and then they changed, or did they change it so that it was through circuit overseers?
Correct. That's what they did, So it used to be the branch office.
That's right.
They basically threw the circuit overseers under the bus and
said, right,
it's the circuit overseers now who do it. So if anything comes back, if an elder turns out to be a bad one, then it goes back to the CO and he gets in trouble.
No. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you're right, there were quite a few changes.
There was lots of changes coming in those years, kind of between 2009 and, well, present day. It hasn't stopped. And I think possibly when I look back, possibly some of it was triggered by the financial crash. There was a lot less money being contributed, in the contribution boxes, but also they were getting hit big time with child sex abuse cases, lawsuits. I just read about one today actually where someone got a £3 million payoff, and that's just one. So the money was starting to dry up.
It was the music that you noticed.
Yeah.
And having read that chapter, did you then notice the music was designed in a particular way to maybe evoke a particular emotion or anything?
It felt more emotive. Definitely did. Yeah, it was almost, because I'd always liked classical music, and it is very emotive. It can put you in a great mood. It can depress you to death. It can do a lot with your emotions. And I just felt that the piano music had never really done that with me. But the orchestral music, when that replaced the old piano scores, I felt, they're trying to do something here. They're trying to evoke a greater sense of either belonging, or they're trying to evoke your emotions a bit more.
And I suppose that's I've been reading about the hormones that we produce in our bodies, and certainly serotonin and oxytocin. Singing is a good way of producing those hormones, and singing in groups is a good way of developing connection.
Right.
So and singing stimulates your vagal nerve, which is kind of the superhighway between your body and your brain. So singing and music, you're right, does have a massive emotional, physical, hormonal impact on us. And obviously obviously all churches use singing, don't they? And I've walked into a church where somebody was singing at an Ave Maria and I cried. It was so beautiful. So yeah, that's interesting that it was that thing that triggered your question or your thinking that then kind of rolled on to other things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it kind of opened the floodgate then for my brain to say, well, it's okay to question because, you know, you're searching for the facts. You're searching for the facts as to why this change has been made. And then it kind of opened me up to doing some objective research. The next big shocker for me really was the Australia Royal Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will probably, you know, if they're ex-witnesses, they will have heard of it. So for anyone who hasn't heard of it, basically this was the Australian government bringing lots of different organisations, like the Church of, well, in this country it'd be the Church of England or the Catholic Church or the Scouts or the Brownies.
Yeah, it was all any kind of organised group, including all sorts of religions, wasn't it, that they investigated for where child abuse had happened and gone unchallenged. So they said they put a lot of money into saying, let's investigate it all, and witnesses were a part of that.
Yeah, so I watched some of the court hearings online, and the ones to do with the witnesses. And what really shook me was when Jeffrey Jackson, who is still a member of the governing body,
lied under oath.
He lied. He actually lied repeatedly.
And were you still a witness when you were watching that?
I was still a witness, yeah. I was still a witness.
That would have been shocking then, because I remember staying up in the night and watching that, but having left, I was thinking, I wonder what he's going to say when they ask him these questions, because he's either going to have to tell the truth, which will be damning, or he's going to have to lie. So I was less shocked. I was disappointed, but I wasn't shocked. But for a witness to watch that.
I guess you'd been out for a good over 10 years then, hadn't you?
Yeah. How did you feel then when you saw him lie, when you saw a member of the governing body lie?
I was just shocked, because in the previous court sessions there was quite a lot of these, and I think they're still online. You can still watch them.
They are.
They had members of the branch and they had some elders on, and I've got to say, I say this in the nicest possible way, they were not the sharpest tools in the box.
No, they weren't. There were some that were more genuine than others, and your heart kind of went out to them because you saw them struggling to hold their genuine beliefs together under the gaze of what was obviously highlighting really difficult situations. But some of them you felt were absolutely disingenuous.
Yes.
And Jeffrey Jackson, if I can find the link, I will put the link to his testimony in the show notes, so that anyone who is asking for a friend can have a look and see what they think, because obviously we've said he lied. I think people need to go and look for themselves and not either say we're not telling the truth or just accept that he did lie. People need to look at it and decide for themselves what they think.
Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend anyone to watch that. It's a good few hours of court hearings. So I heard that Jeffrey Jackson was going to come on, and I thought, oh, good. Now they've got one of the governing body. He's very well spoken. He's eloquent. He's very intelligent. I thought, right, we're going to get a good defence of our faith now. And he came on and he lied and he lied and he lied. And I think they actually said, when they were summing up in the court, and it's in the court documents as well, the transcripts, that Jeffrey Jackson and a number of the other elders were evasive and unhelpful in the court hearings. And let's not forget, this is about child abuse. So
that's right. Yeah.
They would be falling over each other to say, let's stamp this child abuse out, let's help the government, let's help the police. But they were just evasive. And it turned out that in Australia there were 1,006 documented occurrences of child abuse within Jehovah's Witness congregations.
Separate from their own records, from the their own records that the Australian government asked them to turn over.
And not a single
quite
one
something.
been reported to the police.
Not a single one, yeah. So if you think if a body of 3 elders had investigated each case that they knew about of abuse, that's 3,018 separate elders, all of who decided privately and separately, because that's the testimony that was given, that it was kind of it was their own decision not to report to the police. 3,018 elders in Australia had all separately decided not to take this particular case to the police.
Yes. Just let that figure sink in. It's just incredible. It's incredible.
It's sad, isn't it? It's sad.
And I've asked people since then who I've spoken to about the Australia Royal Commission, and I've said, in your opinion, if you hear within your community, whether that's a sports team or a social club or whatever, if you hear that there's some abuse going on in a family, what would you do?
Yeah.
And some people have said, I get in touch with social work. And some people have said, I would speak to the police and say, look, I don't have any proof, but I've just heard this rumour. And the majority,
because it's the police's job to investigate. You don't have to go to the police with a sealed case of I've got absolute evidence. You go to the police to say, I think this is happening. Their entire job is to investigate. And if there's no evidence, that's what they'll find. And if there is evidence, that's what they'll find.
Because surely the safety of the child is the number one priority.
Yeah.
This was not this was not reflected by the elders and Jeffrey Jackson. There wasn't a single one reported. So that just blew my mind. That absolutely blew my mind. And I think it was at that point, 2013, that I thought, do you know what? I don't think I am going to be in this organisation much longer. That's when I really started having that thought seriously.
How did you find out about the Australian Royal Commission, given that you were still a witness?
I think I had, while I'd been researching a couple of things online, I'd come across it online. Now, I can't remember if I'd come across it in a news article. You know, I might have just been reading the news online one day or something.
Right, yeah.
And then, obviously, when your eye sees Jehovah's Witnesses are involved as well, you know, you start, your ears prick up then as well, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Anything that's got the name Jehovah in it, you're like a meerkat. You think, oh, why? Yeah, what's that about? And actually, there's another taster for another podcast. We do need to talk about the impact of the internet and the kind of modern social media and the connectivity of the world, and how that has changed perhaps how people inside and outside think. Because you're right, years ago there was no researching. That's how my mum and dad ended up inside in 1968. They were having a Bible study. My dad didn't entirely believe everything he was hearing. He was trying to research it and validate it, and he said all I could do was go down the library and look in the Encyclopedia Britannica. So, you know, that's not but,
so people
topic for another day.
People like him, that would be the only option back then, because you didn't have the internet, you didn't have smartphones, you couldn't verify things quickly. Interestingly, when the bombshell of the Australia Royal Commission hit me, it really affected me, that actually. A number of weeks I was not myself, because I was thinking in my head, I was trying to do these mental gymnastics, thinking governing body members lying, people are lying, you know, things and not the truth. And I picked up on the fact that the governing body was now paying millions and millions of pounds and millions of dollars to pay off these child abuse victims.
Cases,
So this is children that have been brought up in congregations where they've been abused, and because of the sort of Neanderthal way that the elders deal with it, instead of going straight to the authorities, the abuse was carrying on, or people were getting away with it. And I thought, the money that they are paying out is coming out of my pocket.
Yeah.
So I
I know.
immediately stopped contributing in the contribution box.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And in a way, you know how every conversation comes back to Hitler? I feel like every conversation I have about witnesses comes back to child abuse. It always loops round in the end. But that brings us back to the protest, because I had some banners that said, if you are being abused, not even just sexually abused, the banner didn't say that, that's me saying that. If you have been abused, phone 101. Don't go to the elders. Phone the police, not the elders, because you're entitled to phone the police. It's not a sin to report a crime against your body. And that's kind of what I wanted, not to subvert people's faith or to say stop being in this organisation, but to say, if you're in an abusive situation as an adult or a child, phone the police, not the elders.
Yeah, it's good. It is an interesting point, that, because I understand. I haven't checked up on this before the podcast. I'll have to go back and check it. But I believe that the current guidance for an elder, if they hear about an instance of abuse in the congregation, is to phone the branch office. So
yes,
it's to phone the authorities, or it's not to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
there are some witnesses that would go straight to the police. It's the natural instinct, but yeah, the official thrust of people as it gets higher up the organisation is to be more careful and not to bring shame upon Jehovah's name.
That is exactly it. Not to bring the name of the congregation into disrepute.
Yeah,
that's almost used as a weapon, I think. Almost, don't, we'll sort it, we'll deal with it internally, because we don't want.
When you think about say an abusive family situation, not a witness, just a family situation where maybe there's domestic violence going on, secrecy is what holds it together. You if you're a woman or a man being the victim of domestic violence, you're not going to tell your mates, you're not going to tell your sister or your mum or your dad or your colleague at work, because of the shame that you feel, and you don't want everyone to think that your family's a mess up.
Yes.
So it's kind of the same thing, but in a religious setting. I do get it, and it's what you'd say to children. If someone was bullying a child at school, you'd say, don't keep it to yourself, tell a teacher, tell your mum, tell somebody, tell the guy at rugby, tell your mate's dad, tell anybody, an adult that can help you. But when it becomes a bigger organisational thing, it's like the shame is bigger, and therefore you feel this urge to keep it secret.
Yeah, you almost feel like you have to protect the organisation, and that takes precedence over your own safety in a way.
Yeah, you do. It's sad, isn't it? So after the Australian Royal Commission, then you started to research things online.
Yeah, then the floodgates really opened then, and I was watching videos that XJWs had put online. There was a lot of the stuff that I thought, I'm not sure about that, but I had an open mind. I was taking it in, and thinking about it, and I'd decided in about 2013 I was going to leave at some point. And it took me nearly 4 years from there to leave. There was the dynamic of, you've got no social structure outside of the witnesses. Everybody that I was friends with or that was in my support network and family, they're all witnesses. So
you've got no mates. I thought that was just accidental. I thought when I left, because I just faded accidentally, I didn't mean to leave. I think my subconscious meant me to leave. And I remember thinking, I've got mates. And I just thought, I must just be a really awful person. It never occurred to me that I had been actively prevented from having mates outside of the organisation. And therefore, when I left, I was really isolated. And I just remember thinking, I've got no mates.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things that keeps a lot of witnesses in, even if they want to leave. They want to keep is that there's no social structure outside. You go in from having this organization where there's hundreds, thousands of people that, you know, you could call your friend, to absolutely nothing. So yeah, I think
I see on some XJW discussion threads, some people sometimes have like reached a real low point in their exit, and they say, you know, I had friends inside, I had people I could do things with, I kind of miss, I wish I was still in, and yet there's a reason why people left, but there's this yearning for that comforting social structure.
Yeah, and I think it is a natural thing, isn't it, that you want to be liked and you want to be in a group with your peers and do, you know, social things, whether it's a football club or, you know, I don't know, a politics club, or some other kind of social group where you've got other like-minded people. I think that is quite a natural thing, isn't it?
It's essential, and also it's very frightening when you leave. I remember wanting mates, not wanting to go back, but not daring to do anything. Like I didn't dare go out with people at work because they were worldly. I was frightened of them. I wouldn't have dared join a sports club or, oh my God, politics. Crumbs, I would never have dared got involved in that. Everything that is a natural human option had been infused with such fear for me that I didn't dare start growing a life outside. And I think that's probably what keeps some people stuck, where their fears, they carry the fears with them, and therefore they're just out without ever able to put together a life. And we are social, we're social creatures, we need that social connection.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think looking back, I might have left in a different manner. I might have tried to build up a bit more and done what you did, you know, a fade over a period of time, whereas I just left. I wrote an email disassociating myself, and I left overnight.
Did you?
Yeah, because it had got to the point where I thought, I know this organization is rotten, and I need to leave it because my conscience won't let me be in it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if anyone's listening to the podcast and in time listens to other episodes, and they may be faced with that dilemma, it's quite a difficult one, isn't it? Because you'll have your family and your friends, and do you want to lose them, or do you want to fade slowly over the years? You know, it's a difficult one.
I think we need another podcast about that, about whether it's, because I don't know what the current rules are about fading, and whether you can still get away with that or not. I know they're slightly changing the rule. Well, they're not changing the rules about disfellowship, and they're changing the language around it a bit, aren't they? But I'm sure the same behaviour still occurs. But I think that's one for another day.
It is, yeah. I think the language has been changed around it a bit, and I certainly felt when I was at my dad's funeral just a few months ago that some of the witnesses don't view that as a change, but others interpret it a different way. So there seems to be a little bit of confusion about that. Yeah.
So if you look back on the story that you've related, the question, I'm going to put words in your mouth because I'm bossy, and then it's up to you to tell me I'm wrong. The question perhaps that you were asking for a friend was, why are things changing? What is the purpose of the change? And I'd like to investigate that in an open-minded way and see what the direction of change is and what the purpose is. And it was music perhaps that triggered that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone, for instance, was asking the question, okay, so the organisation says that in the UK we're no longer allowed to take not at homes. So that that was a direction given about 4 years ago, I think. Now, I think the organisation has been quite open about this particular change, and said it's because of a data protection issue.
It's because of GDPR.
Yes. So using that principle, there's a change, there must be a reason for it.
Yeah.
I would advise anyone to look at any change, such as sisters now being allowed to wear trousers and brothers being allowed to have beards. What is the real reason for that change? We know that there's a reason being given. Is that the real reason, or is that spin?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a very fair question, and I think you should be allowed to investigate those questions, and it not be apostasy. Like, it wouldn't, if you found the answer to that, it shouldn't wreck your faith. If the truth is the truth, you should be able to find out answers like, why don't we take not at homes, or why are the brothers in Bulgaria allowed blood transfusions and we're not, or why, this is a really old one, mind, why did the magazines, did we stop paying for them, why did they go free? You should be able to find those answers without it wrecking a genuine faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can apply the question to pretty much anything in the organisation. So, for instance, the change of the generation. So we always understood the generation to be those that had sort of lived in the early 20th century. And then that changed. And then it changed again more recently. So why is the governing body changing it? What is their real reason? What are they trying to prevent, or what are they trying to make happen? Why are they changing such a key doctrine? Do some research, go away and think about it, and you might come up with the answer that's surprising.
We might need to talk about that on a different podcast, because I've got 2 more iterations of the generation that I was taught to believe. But perhaps we'll save that for another day.
I'm still confused, Louise. So if any listeners want to, send us a message and explain it to me, I would love an explanation of it from a current witness.
Yeah. What I shall do is set up an email to go with this podcast, and I'll put it in the show notes, and then maybe somebody could explain it.
Yeah, and it would be really good to hear from people anonymously. Just anything, questions for us, questions that they've been asking, because all we want to do is just say, we don't want to break down anyone's faith. If someone's got a strong faith, great. But if you are having doubts and questions, because we've both been there, we know the mental gymnastics that being a witness requires. Questions, absolutely welcome.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Adam. Can I just reveal now that I really did want to change my name to Eve for this podcast. But that's just childish.
Yeah, it might have been 2 on the nose, that Adam and Eve answer your questions.
Adam and Eve answer your questions. Yeah. Okay, so it's Adam and Louise, and we've been asking for a friend this week. Why do things change? So thank you to our 2 listeners for listening. I'm just going to fill you in here, Adam. That's my standard joke for every podcast, so
2 listeners.
I see no reason to change it.
No, absolutely not. Two's a good start.
Okay, thank you very much to our 2 listeners. Please write into our email that will be created this week after I've edited this podcast. And thank you, Adam, for chatting this week.
Thanks, Louise.
Thank you.
Now I hear you say there'll be another day, and you didn't say what I heard you say. Another promise fails, another promise made, but I see who you are and it's not who you say.